This video is brought to you by Education.au. Creative, capable, connected. It was produced by Education.au's Strategic ICT Advisory Service, a project funded by the Australian Government's Department of Education, Employment and Workplace Relations.
It's next Monday evening. You've just had a really challenging but very fruitful discussion with the Deputy Prime Minister, which has sort of locked away the budget for this year. But she calls you back just as you're about to leave the room and says, "Oh, look, Evan, can we just have a bit of an informal chat for a second, if you don't mind? I've got a couple of opportunities in the next little while to try and influence the PM in terms of the agenda going forward." And what I'd like, and I know you've been having some recent discussions about ICT and learning and teaching, I was just wondering if you could just give me a few hints about the sort of things that we might need to start thinking about in terms of issues and challenges and maybe even policies.
Thank you.
No pressure, Evan.
Yeah. Well, I'll of course cheat and use ideas which are already in my head. One of the issues, if the Deputy Prime Minister is talking to the Prime Minister on these issues, would be to find a way to position the issues that we're talking about here in a way which is central to his concerns about both the government and the future course of policy. And an obvious way to do that would be to work on the current trope of whichever acronym you prefer, the GFC or whatever the hell the other ones that are around in terms of the economic issues, and the fact that that is just going to accelerate the development that people who are coming out of our education system are going to need to be able to deal with changes in the structure of the Australian economy, changes the nature of jobs in the Australian economy, and are going to need to have the skills to deal in that very harsh environment, very quickly changing environment, where, to use the cliches that a number of us are aware of, the great mass of jobs they'll actually be doing are jobs that don't currently exist. So therefore you have to continue the process which this government has already adopted of saying that the education and training system is not just an important component of social policy, but is also a crucial component of economic policy, and it is the core of labour force productivity and indeed in wider economy productivity. And as part of that, you have to ensure that the education system is capable of producing people who can be effective in that kind of environment. And the one thing you do know about whatever people will be doing in the future is that those jobs will be requiring a sophisticated interaction with technology. They may not be technology jobs, but we know from certainly we're having here, but we just know anyway, they will require the ability to use technology in a very sophisticated way to get things done. And therefore it is inconceivable that those kinds of students are going to be able to do that if they are not immersed in an education environment which itself is technology rich and which does not, in the process of learning, require sophisticated use of technology. Or to put it in a deficit mode, if we continue the current mode, which is that children coming into our schools go from a technology rich environment to still a highly technology deprived environment for most of the things they do in their education, it's going to be a problem. And also it perpetuates the situation where the technology still is largely what people use when they're not actually in the classroom, when they're doing things outside the core part of the teaching day. If the technology is not in that core part of the teaching day, then those things are simply going to be a problem. And that would be my advice, that this is the pitch that you need to do that. In terms of what you need to do to address that, I'm not going to try and summarise all of the things that have come out to date or all the things that we're building on, other than to say that, that's already what to say, that it won't work if you're doing anything other than starting from the point of what do you want the students to be able to do and how can technology facilitate that? That's the question, not how to ensure that technology itself is in some way centre of things. That's you may well come to that conclusion, but that's not the starting point.
Okay, great. We'll backtrack to today and real time. Lessons for you from today?
One key lesson which came out for me, which I've said to a couple of you already, heightened something I hadn't quite deduced the relationship quite so strongly, which is just a an interesting issue we're going to all have to grapple with, at least those inside the bureaucracy are going to have to grapple with, which is that the technology gets its best results because of the fact that it does connect people, and it connects people with each other and with information in, as I call it, a horizontal way, in a way where there is a direct interaction between a person, another person, and any other person in the world, any other piece of information in the world. And the power of that, as we particularly see now from the Web 2 technologies, is they're actually done deliver some very, very interesting ways on that. And right outside the education space, if you look at public interest sites now, where people are able to do really, really interesting things in terms of taking information which is around, including in boring public websites, and turn them into very, very powerful tools, both for people to deal with their own daily lives and also to influence governments in that particular space. All very interesting things happening. None of that is compatible with hierarchical control of information, with hierarchical control of what happens day by day. And I had some time in my own bureaucratic life amused myself by looking at the extent to which people are trying to use Web 2 technologies for dissemination of message, and just reflecting to myself how absolutely incompatible that was with what I've also seen in my life as a bureaucrat, a massive increase in interest in total message control, and how those two things are actually incompatible and you can't win both. But I hadn't quite perceived the extent to which we're really going to have to deal with that in the education space, that we're just not going to get the full value out of these technologies without having some very ugly fights on the issue of control. And it's not going to be easy.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot. Cheers. I'll just make a few concluding comments, and particularly sort of where to from here. In terms of the project, we've released, as I'm sure most of you are aware, the collaborative teaching and learning report, and there's an all singing, all dancing video to go with it. We've had some fantastic feedback from around the world about that, and not the least of which has been from people in this group today. We've also released the site blocking report, which has been very relevant to today's discussion, I think. The workforce capability report is with our the DWA advisory committee for final sign-off for publication. So hopefully there might be a little bit more toing and froing in editorial on that, but that should be out very soon. We'll also, in the next couple of months, be producing 2 more specific reports, one on e-portfolios and one, this is a beauty, on the implications for national infrastructure of the move from organisation-centric to person-centric tools and services. From today, there will be a communique going to the department for final sign-off. Of course, you've got the information from the wikis, but it's a bit all over. We'll be opening a new wiki page, because already today there's been a number of people from outside of the symposium who've asked to participate and comment through the twittering and otherwise. So we're going to have a page open for you and others to make some further comments. We're going to put that together. It's open now, fantastic, thanks. We're going to put all that together into a communique. That goes to the department for sign-off and will come out. Then the next use of today's information is going to be in a final report. It's going to be called a report on emerging technologies, which will essentially be a synthesis of all of the reports that we've done during the course of the project. And of course, we'll incorporate a significant amount of the input from today. So that will be finished by the 30th of June. I've been really taken aback by both the quality of the inputs right through this process, today included. Certainly one of the learnings for us in developing research and policy reports has been the fact that we can now use Web 2 tools to sort of help enrich it. So our online think tankettes have been a great success, and we certainly in the future would like to use that sort of process more and more. And I think the other thing that's been really encouraging has been from the Federal Department, from DWA, who along the way have said to us with each of these reports as we've worked through, look, we really need specific policy and programmatic recommendations around all this stuff. It's incredibly complicated. We've got a big job of work to do, and we need some advice specifically around those things. So we've been very encouraged by that and have provided, as you'll see in the reports as they come out, quite specific recommendations for action, which is, I think, fantastic.